These made when we when we did the press release to announce to the world that we were bringing Beat Street to Broadway and that we were partnering as a co-producer with myself, Arthur Baker, our British financier partner Richard Fern, and the one and only Nas. This was his axe.
No.
So while we were playing the song, every time that Jean felt it, he plugged this thing in.
Wow.
So we're playing it. It goes blah, 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 and that was our song.
So where does Grey come from?
All right, that's a great question.
Yeah, I was
so
going to ask
Jean Basquiat named the band Grey, and it's based on the medical book textbook Grey's Anatomy.
Wow. In terms of as a figure, Basquiat, what was Basquiat like?
When I first met Jean-Michel Basquiat, within the first 5 minutes of meeting him, and this is true with everyone that meets him, you realize that you're in the presence of someone special, a superhuman person. But Patty Astor was a real important player on the downtown scene. The Rocksteady crew with the leadership of Crazy Legs really set the stage for the future of breaking. Negril was the very first truly hip-hop club because it had all the elements. Breaking, graffiti, rapping, and turntablism. That didn't happen in the Bronx. So breaking actually drew everyone in. Breaking was the Pied Piper of hip-hop culture. And everybody's on the hip-hop jock. But back then, in the early 80s, there was a real competition between London and New York as to which city was the dopest. And London was coming out with all kinds of amazing bands and amazing music. And New York was coming out with all kinds of amazing things. And there was a lot of competition, a lot of anger or whatever, but it was healthy because we made each other even stronger through competition. All right, you ready, kids?
You know what time it is.
2, 1, 2, 3, hit it!
On this week's show, I have someone in the iconic cab who was one of the key figures who helped bring hip-hop to the masses. He was the first person to use the term hip-hop in a publication. He created and was the manager of one of the greatest b-boy crews of all time from the early 80s, the New York City Breakers. He's the writer and host with the most of the Graffiti Rock TV show. One of the creatives who was behind the film Beat Street. He was one of the directors on that. He's the founding member alongside the legendary artist Jean-Michel Basquiat and formed the band Grey. He's a hip-hop historian like me. He has a wealth of knowledge and one of the true ambassadors of hip-hop culture. I'm excited to say we have the trailblazer, the powerhouse, the big Don himself in the back from the Big Apple. We have the one and the only Michael Holman in the back.
Yo, what's up, my boy Steve?
Yes, Michael.
Rocking the black cab.
You know that, in the iconic, world-class, famous taxi cab.
You know it.
It's an absolute honour once again to be talking to you and to let anyone know we're not going to be having a real kind of in-depth, chat because we've already spoken before. We've done an interview before via Zoom. It was over 3 hours long and it was an incredible interview. We was talking about, when you introduced Malcolm McLaren to Africa Bambaataa back in 1981 in the projects of Bronx River. That was an incredible story. And we spoke about, New York City Breakers and Grey. Yeah. It was an absolutely fantastic interview. So this is going to be more of a kind of casual chat. But I know, you're in London at the moment and you're also promoting your new album, which I've listened to this and it is absolutely mind-blowing.
Thank you. Wow. Thank you, bro.
Tell me quickly about the album before I'll start firing up a few questions on you, because we're going to play one of the tracks at the end.
I just happen to have a copy of it, a 12-inch right here. In the cab, in the black cab, last of the beats. It is about 3 years of work. We've got really some interesting collaborators on this album. For example, King Britt from Diggable Planets. We've got Roger Guinevere Smith, an actor who's in all the Spike Lee tracks, Spike Lee movies. We got the one and only from Mo Wax and Uncle, from London, James Lavelle,
Big up to James Lavelle, and I'm a massive fan of James Lavelle. And
Me too.
I'll tell you what, Michael, when you send that track through, you know, I was blown away once again. I mean, the album is absolutely stunning. And that track as well, what James Lavelle done, you know, was a masterpiece.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, you know, it's a collaboration. He's working with a song of ours and then taking it apart and putting it back together again, remixing it basically. It's called New York City, Have Some Pity. Girl So Pretty Makes Me Dizzy. And I just want to shout out to my bandmate, Nicholas Taylor, the High Priest from the LES. He is my partner in music and in crime for the last 40 plus years in Gray.
Wow.
Was one of the founding members of the band along with Jean-Michel Basquiat and myself. We had people like Vincent Gallo in the band as well, Wayne Clifford in the band. And but we carried on back in the 90s with just Nick and I. We played at the ICA in London back in 97, I think. And we've been making music ever since then. We came out, funny enough, it was after we got back together again. And the reason we got back together again was because we formed to play ourselves in the Julian Schnabel film about Jean-Michel Basquiat called Basquiat. All the original members came together, played ourselves, except for Jean-Michel Basquiat, of course, who was played by Jeffrey Wright. And after we played, I was noticing, wow, you know, we were kind of just messing around for the camera, acting like we were actually performing at the Mug Club back in the early 80s. And I heard some really good things. And I said, hey, let's get back together again and start playing again. So myself and Jeffrey Wright and Nick Taylor and Wayne Clifford, we got together and started playing again. And eventually, you know, Jeffrey Wright had to take care of his acting career. And Wayne Clifford went off and did his own thing. And Nick Taylor and I kept, not Nick Taylor from Duran Duran, by the way. This is a different Nick Taylor. Nick Taylor, DJ High Priest. Nick and I continued with Gray and came out with a record in 2010 called Shades Of. And then 2019, we did a remix of the Shades Of album with artists like Todd Rundgren, Hank Shockley from Public Enemy.
Wow.
Who else was on that? Some Wild People, Free the Robots, Dean Tony Parks from the John Cale Band. Dean Tony Parks is on this album as well, by the way. He's John Cale's drummer. And John Cale, of course, was in the Velvet Undergrounds, the band that Warhol put together with Lou Reed.
Oh, Lou Reed.
Yeah.
Lou Reed.
So Dean Tony Parks is presently the drummer for John Cale's band. And John Cale, of course, was in the Velvet Underground with Lou Reed. John Cale was from Wales, I believe, and came to New York and joined Lou Reed to make the Velvet Underground. And so John Cale continues to make music in his own band, and his drummer, Dean Tony Parks, is my good friend. And right now, actually, Dean Tony Parks is on the road with Andre 3000.
Wow.
You know, Andre 3000 is doing that new experimentation band with woodwind music and flutes and recorders and different things like that. And my boy Dean Tony Parks is drumming with him. And then as soon as that finishes, I'm sure he's going to go back to the John Cale band. But he's part of Gray. He's like an official part of Gray himself. He actually does a track on here. It's called Monochromatic Breakdown. And that's another remix of Gray tracks that he did. So yeah, so just to wrap that up, we've got all kinds of people from like the downtown art scene, like Glenn O'Brien. He's on a track called Willie Mays, which is really about Jean-Michel Basquiat. Roger Guinevere Smith does a poetry track. Roger Guinevere Smith, who's a Spike Lee actor and a good friend of mine out in LA, he does a track called Brooklyn Sky, which is truly a poem about Jean-Michel Basquiat as well. We've got King Britt on a track called Dan Asher, the Mug Club version that he did a remix of. and made it slamming with our boy.
I've heard it. I mean, it's absolutely banging.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
wicked.
like, anyone watching this, we're going to be playing a couple of tracks off the album in the back of the cab because, as I say, it's a real kind of masterpiece, you know. And the good thing I like about Grey as well, Michael, is you're very, very experimental. You know, you're trying like new sounds, new things. I mean, it's incredible what you do.
Thank you. And well, and that track, Dan Asher, which was originally a great track called Dan Asher, which King Britt remixed. On the mic is our boy Zach, who goes by the name Burgundy Prince, and he's spitting the most abstract, surreal, bugged out rhymes.
Wow.
He's on fire. So that track, Dan Asher is wicked. New York City, Have Some Pity with James Lavelle. He rips it up.
Man, that's going to blow the... You know what? That's going to blow the cab up. When we're driving around, I'm going to drive around and play that and maybe add a couple of bomb effects and sirens. But all I can say is I've listened to that as well. And what another track. You know, anyone watching this, you're going to be blown away at how incredible this tune is. And the album itself is as I say, it's a masterpiece.
Thank you, brother.
It's a real masterpiece.
That means a lot.
Yeah, it really is.
I hope that masterpiece comment comes out on the tape, on the show.
Don't worry, that's not getting an edit. That's going straight into the top.
All right, here it is.
But tell me about the sleeve as well. Look at that.
Okay, so this is an interesting story. So this contraption here is actually a kinetic work of sculpture done by an artist named Peter Arton. He's an avant-garde sculptor from upstate New York. And in 1980, he created this work of sculpture. As you can see, it's like a grocery store shopping cart that's been deconstructed into this sound machine with a giant 15 horsepower electric motor that turned this axle around inside this piece of sculpture like a spring. And whenever you plugged it in, it made this incredible noise like brah, rah, 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 rah. And we did a performance, Gray did a performance in 1980 for the important gallerist and art collector Leo Castelli for his 78th birthday party at the Rock Lounge in New York City. And Jean played this as his lead instrument. This was his axe.
No.
So while we were playing the song, every time that Jean felt it, he plugged this thing in.
Wow.
So we're playing it, it goes blah, 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 and that was our song.
Wow.
So that was where we were coming from artistically and musically.
That's what I'm saying. It's so experimental.
It's experimental. And so this is the actual contraption piece of sculpture that Jean played some 40 plus years ago.
That's mind-blowing, isn't it?
And we found this photograph and had to put it on the cover of the album. And then back here is a silhouette of myself and Nick Taylor, DJ High Priest, getting ready to get busy. And you can get this album, just go on Amazon and get your own vinyl copy. It's also on Spotify for all you that don't have turntables. But all you heads out there that rock vinyl, and I love you the most, from coast to bloody coast, rocking that 12-inch vinyl or 7-inch, this is for you. So just jump on Amazon and put in Last of the Beats and look for Gray, look for this image.
And it's Gray with an A.
Gray with an A. Thank you, Stephen.
Gray with an A.
Gray with an A, not with an E. It's not the color. I was going
to say, where does Gray come from?
All right, that's a great question.
Yeah, I was going to ask that.
Basquiat named the band Gray, and it's based on the medical book, textbook, Gray's Anatomy.
Wow.
Which I believe was a British surgeon who put together a book of different diseases with illustrations going back almost 100 years, and it's called Gray's Anatomy. And Jean-Michel Basquiat, that was one of his first tools of learning how to draw the human figure.
Wow.
He used that book and it inspired him, and you see a lot of references from Gray's Anatomy in Jean's paintings.
His art.
Yeah, and so it's interesting that the band was called Gray. But not only did it refer to Gray's Anatomy, but Gray, in my mind, was also, and just that one word Gray, which is so cool, it's not the this or the that, it's just Gray, speaks to our experimental, industrial vibe, you know, And that's kind of the color gray, like, machines making noise and making music. I always thought that the way we approached music in some of our tracks was as if you went into a factory after it had been closed down, and the machines magically came to life, like that Disney film Fantasia, and started to make music, or what they thought was music. And that's truly the aesthetic and the inspiration behind our music in Gray. The machines, like old industrial revolutionary type machines from 150 years ago, clanging and banging and trying to make something beautiful as best they could.
I love that.
That's who we were.
And another thing as well, Michael, Basquiat will be absolutely proud of you for what you're doing and keeping the Grey, the name of Grey out there. In terms of as a figure, Basquiat, what was Basquiat like? Was he a real genius?
Yeah, I mean, absolute genius. I've met through my initial baptism into theater and art and show business. When I was in college, I dropped out for a year and joined this band called the Tubes.
That's right.
And they were a theatrical rock band, and they're actually well known by a certain generation here in the UK. I mean, they had a lot of fans in England. And it was a kind of band that every song had a theatrical presentation with costumes and dancers and props and sets. And that's what I sort of, cut my teeth on as an artist, as a performance artist. And after I graduated from school in San Francisco, University of San Francisco, I instantly came to New York because I was like, that's where I belong, is New York City.
And
met Jean-Michel Basquiat within the first year, and we started Gray that first year. And so there's this carryover from the Tubes in which I designed a lot of our sets for Gray back in New York, back in the early 80s. We'd do all kinds of wild sets and props. And this kind of played into that. This machine kind of played into that aesthetic and that idea.
Wow. But no, we've got to give a massive RIP to Jean-Michel Basquiat, What an absolute remarkable, inspirational artist.
Well, yeah, I'm sorry I got off topic because you said he must have been a real genius, and I was trying to get to that, and I kind of went off topic. So when I first met Jean-Michel Basquiat, within the first 5 minutes of meeting him, and this is true with everyone that meets him, you realize that you're in the presence of someone special, a superhuman person. His sensitivity was so great, and sensitive in many ways. Sensitive to slights and being offended, but also sensitive to what was beautiful, what was not beautiful. And in essence, by starting this band with Basquiat and being his friend for those couple of years in the beginning before he blew up and became famous, it was as if I had gone to the Basquiat University and was a student of him. And even though I was 5 years older than him, he was 500 years beyond me.
Light years ahead.
Light years ahead. He was such a genius, such a creative genius. And his superpower, what allowed him to make such incredible art, was his sense. He was so dialed in and so attuned to what was beautiful, what was new, what was novel, what was special, and then also what was tacky, what didn't work, what to avoid. His superpower was sensitivity, and he used it to create incredible art, to write incredible poetry, to make incredible music in Gray. And I got to be in his company and be a collaborator with him, which I'm so proud to say. And when I look back on it now, instead of being all full of myself and proud of the fact that I was in a band with him, I'm far more humble and saying that I learned at his feet what genius was. And as much as I could glean from him, as much as I could absorb from him, I wanted to be as brilliant or try to represent the brilliance that he shared with me in my own work. And that's my struggle, and that's my objective to this day, you know, is to, as you say, make Jean proud, make work that he would approve of. And that's a big deal.
That is a massive deal, yeah. And you know, you've kept the essence of Grey in this new album.
I'd like to think so. Have you heard our other album, the Shades of album?
From 2010, yeah, I've heard bits of that, yeah.
Yeah, you need to peep that. Like, get a hold of that maybe too, and find, because that one, by the way, Steve, that album is far more avant-garde and experimental in essence, in a way, than this one is. This one was, we had already done that heavy experimentation in Shades of, and this was taking that experimentation and going into a little more conventionalism, like hip hop and rap. But there's still, like as you said, there's still a lot of avant-garde in here. And probably for me, what's conventional Grey is probably very avant-garde for everybody else anyway, you know. Yeah.
I can't wait for the, you know, for my viewers to listen to, you know, to this album, because the cab is going to be literally rocking.
Yeah, I want them to hear the whole album, and I want them to hear the whole Shades of album anthology, which is a 3-album set, 3 vinyl disc set. And I think you can get it at Rough Trade Records, and I'm sure you can get it on Amazon. So we only have those 2 albums that we put out.
But they're very, very important albums, you know, very going to become, you know, iconic, and as I say, like a masterpiece. I mean, look at that. Absolutely beautiful.
Lots of style. My wife, Sarah Holman, who I love dearly, designed the album, so she's quite talented. She's a fashion designer.
Wow.
She works for Anina Bing, the Danish fashion line, but she's such a great graphic. Yeah. She has such a great eye that you know, a lot of people would keep their art away from their wives.
Let me have another look at the front. Yeah, because it's been halved with black to one side, white to the
precisely. So this was her
right.
Her work was this side is actually in negative, is the negative version of this. So this contraption is positive on this side and negative on this side.
I can see it, yeah. It's great. And you look at the lettering, Grey is in white, and then the AY is in the in black. Yeah.
Exactly.
Absolute masterpiece.
Thank you.
It's a masterpiece.
That means a lot, man. I appreciate that.
It's a master blaster of a slice of vinyl. That's what it is. But also,
we're going to talk about
we're going to
Beat Street
we're going to talk about a
Broadway.
few other little bits and pieces before we're going to like get the cab rocking.
Okay.
Also, I want to give another a big RIP as well to someone we lost lately. He was big as well on the downtown scene from the Fun Gallery. I want to give a big RIP to Patty Astor from Wild Style.
Yeah, Patty Astor was a friend and a real collaborator, and you know, she was. I didn't realize we weren't going anywhere. I didn't need this.
We will be in a minute. Don't worry.
But Patty Astor was a real important player on the downtown scene. You know, she was actually an actress in a lot of the downtown films, made by people like Eric Mitchell and Amos Poe in the late '70s, and then she starred in Charlie Ahern's Wild Style, as everybody knows, and then what she did that was really instrumental and really important on the downtown scene was opening up the Fun Gallery, where she showed everyone from, you know, Futura and Dondi and Jean-Michel Basquiat and Keith Haring and Kenny Scharf, like all the major players got to show at the Fun Gallery, and that was Patty Astor's brainchild.
So a big RIP to Patty Astor. And I read Patty's book as well. It was called The Fun Gallery, and it was an absolute brilliant book. So we've lost a superstar there.
Indeed.
Yeah, we've lost another star there. But yeah, moving on to let's move on to Beat Street. I mean, we've covered the Beat Street thing, you know, before, so there's no need to go into a huge amount of detail about Beat Street because we've covered that before.
Right.
But basically,
did we talk about it coming to Broadway?
Yeah, I want to talk about that in a minute, actually. But what I do want to talk about is, can you tell me the importance of those crews in Beat Street? You know, because coming from London and the UK, crews like Rocksteady Crew, you know, the Dynamic Breakers and the New York City Breakers were very, very inspirational to us from the UK.
Sure.
So can you tell me, you know, the importance of those crews?
Well, you know, the most important of all those crews, I would have to say, is clearly Rocksteady Crew, with leadership coming from, you know, Crazy Legs, Ken Swift, you know, rest in peace, Frosty Freeze, Kuriaki, Buck 4. You know, they really laid down the groundwork for the new wave, the new second wave of breaking.
They blew it up to the masses, isn't it?
They really were there at ground zero in terms of what breaking became. There was a wave of breaking and breakers before them who were the originators, going back, you know, 5 or 6 years before Rocksteady Crew, and there was even an earlier rendition of the Rocksteady Crew. But the Rocksteady Crew, with the leadership of Crazy Legs, really set the stage for the future of breaking. And I was actually, you know, a part-time manager for them for a minute. When I brought my event that I was paid by Malcolm McLaren to put together, the Zulu Nation Throwdown, opened up for Bow Wow Wow in September of 1981. I was approached by a young lady also from London and knew Malcolm and was
Lady Blue.
Cool Lady Blue was on the New Romantic tip, and she approached me. She had this night at a reggae club called Negril, and she asked me if I would bring my hip hop review to her Thursday nights. And it took a few months. By January of '82, we were rocking every Thursday night my Zulu Nation Throwdown with Bambaataa, Jazzy J, Ike C, Ram LZ doing graffiti, Rocksteady Crew dancing. And what's interesting about that is, even though it was downtown, and even though it was in 1982, years after elements of hip hop like rapping and DJing had been appearing in clubs up in the Bronx years before, like as much as 7 years before.
Early 70s.
Mid 70s, not early 70s, but mid 70s in the Bronx. Negril was the very first truly hip hop club, because it had all the elements: breaking, graffiti, rapping, and turntablism. That didn't happen in the Bronx. They didn't let the breakers in the clubs. They didn't let the graffiti artists in the clubs. We did that downtown. That was the magic of bringing the culture downtown. Downtown, we thought it was all one movement, and it really wasn't. They were all separate things. And when we brought it downtown, we were sort of accidental anthropologists, like putting it together, and we really helped, really truly, in many ways, not in every way, but this is sort of a generalization, but in many ways, the downtown impresarios like myself, Fab Five Freddy, Charlie Ahern, Martha Cooper, we were sort of accidental anthropologists in that we packaged hip-hop together under those four elements, not really knowing that it wasn't really that way uptown. We thought it was. We thought everyone knew each other and rolled like that as a posse. But that wasn't the case.
How about the Zulu Nation, obviously Africa Bambaataa, because wasn't the elements also being formed through Zulu Nation?
While they were coming downtown.
Right.
Because of the way they were coming downtown. They weren't doing that on their own. While we were bringing the Zulu Nation artists downtown to perform, even before Negril, like Bambaataa, Fab Five Freddy brought Bambaataa to perform at the Mud Club. And maybe with Jazzy J as well. But again, not all four elements. But as it was coming downtown, I think, and I stress think, because, you know, I have a lot of receipts, but I don't have all the receipts. I believe very strongly that this whole idea of hip hop being multifaceted is really because as it came downtown, we packaged it that way. We presented it to our downtown audiences that way. And they ran with it. And Bambaataa was inspired by that and decided, with the authority of coming from the Bronx, to put his stamp on the idea that this was a multifaceted movement and including knowledge as the fifth element.
Wow.
So there's that.
Wow.
So it's debatable and it's arguable who came up with the idea first to package
As a
breaking
culture.
to package hip hop as a multifaceted movement with turntablism and rapping and dancing and writing. How much the downtown impresarios like myself were influential in making that happen that way. Because if you think about it, a lot of what was going on uptown was kind of just a lot of rap. You had the Sugar Hill Gang coming out with the first record. They didn't have anything to do with breakers or graffiti artists. A lot of the early breakers had stopped dancing, who had picked up breaking again after it had gone out of style.
So
made it more acrobatic and changed it up, made it more martial arts and changed it up.
So it was like Rocksteady did to kind of come in with like the second generation, and then it kind of really, really blew up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because that second generation was doing moves and doing routines that first generation didn't have. That was far more entertaining and far more compelling and shocking. And in that way, it brought the second wave of breaking, and with breaking attached to writing and spitting rhymes and turntablism, breaking. I've always contested that breaking was the lost leader of hip hop. That it was the breakers that everyone wanted to see at first, and then wanting to come and see breaking. They heard the rappers, they heard the DJs, they saw the graffiti, and so breaking actually drew everyone in. Breaking was the Pied Piper of hip hop culture.
We have to give a massive props and a massive shout out though to the DJs, the original DJs, and like the legendary people like the Disco King Mario, obviously Bambata,
Flowers,
Herc, Flowers. I mean, there's so many that kind of paved the way on the wheels of steel, from back in the the
well,
early
they were
70s.
always the kings. The DJs were always the kings. I mean,
I was going to say, let's talk about the importance of the DJ, because the DJ is he's like the backbone, isn't it, Michael? The backbone.
Yeah. I mean, in the by the time the mid '80s came along and rap was being recorded and packaged and sold by record labels, it was clear that the kings of hip hop were the rappers. They got all the attention, they got all the love, they got all the money. And slowly but surely, by the end of the 80s, breaking, even as we know it today, lost all of its favor to the audience. It kind of got burned out. Graffiti kind of went underground. The DJs got kicked to the curb. They weren't important anymore. Either they were good producers and they could reinvent themselves as producers, or they just got kind of left by the side of the road. And the rappers became kings because they were the face of the records and they sold records. But before the records were being pressed, the rappers were just helping the DJs carry. They were doing a couple of different things. They would carry records. They would just be there to help the DJ carry his records and set up his turntables. And then at the most glamorous that they ever got to be was the MCs. They were hyping the DJs in those park jams. Those first rappers were simply there to make the DJ look good, to hype the DJ, to shout out the DJ, to shout out the dancers, to keep the party going, to let people know their cars were parked illegally, to tell people when somebody lost keys, to shout out people dancing. And that was all that they were. And then over time, they started to spit rhymes. And then over time, someone thought to record them. And then over time, they became the stars.
They took over. Yeah, that's a really interesting point, Michael. And I love the way you broke that down. Absolutely incredible. But let's go back to Ruza Blue, you know, Cool Lady Blue. I mean, she's also like another trailblazer, you know, one of them key figures like yourself for bringing hip hop to the masses. And she's, you know, originally from London. I mean, when's the first time you met, you know, Lady Blue?
Well, I met her at the performance for Bow Wow Wow. When I brought Malcolm McLaren up to Bronx River, Council Flats, Projects.
That was an amazing story you told me.
That was a wild story. That was the summer of '81 with Rory Johnston, who I by the way had lunch with or dinner with just a couple of months ago in New York. I hadn't seen him in all that time.
Wow.
Since that night. So, you know, when I brought Malcolm up and turned him on to hip hop culture, wasn't even called hip hop culture at the time. And he paid me to put together an act, a review of DJs, rappers, graffiti artists, MCs. He paid me to put together a hip hop review to open up for Bow Wow Wow. My understanding was that Ruza Blue was involved with what Malcolm was doing with the you know, the new romantic fashion thing that was going on
Vivian
here in
Westwood
London,
and all that, yeah.
and how they were trying to position that in New York. It didn't really catch on in New York. Nobody was going to dress like pirates. But anyway, she was there like working with Malcolm. And of course, she was at the Bow Wow Wow show. And she saw what I was doing and I guess found out that it was my show and my review and asked me to bring it to her club. And I was happy to. So what happened with Negril was, it was very important. It's so interesting how much these two Brits were instrumental in the history of hip hop, because first, I take Malcolm up to meet Bambaataa, and he's so turned on that he asked me to put together a hip hop review to open up for Bow Wow Wow. That was historic because before that, no one had ever put together in all the elements. I mean, it was my doing. It was my show, but it was through Malcolm's approval and largesse to let me do it, and his budget to let me do it. It was the first time that all the elements were put on stage in front of a paying audience. And that was because Malcolm allowed me to do that. So that was a big moment in hip hop history in which I went, yes, this is great. That same night, Blue approaches me and says, I have this club. Would you bring your review down to my club? And I was like, yes, another victory, because now, and this is important, like I said earlier, there were other clubs up in the Bronx that had rappers and DJs years before, but never all the elements. And so Negril was the very first time that all the elements of hip hop appeared in front of a paying audience in a nightclub on a regular basis. Never happened before. Twice I made hip hop history with two different Brits, Malcolm and Blue.
Yeah.
So then Blue, and this is kind of interesting. I'll be honest with you. I had this kind of attitude like, you know, well, who are you? You know, you're some Brit from England.
What do you know?
And what do you know? And when she approached me to do this thing at the Roxy. Now, the Roxy was just a roller rink. I didn't know anything about it. It was nobody knew what the Roxy was. I had this attitude like, you know, this isn't your thing. I've been doing this for years, and you know, no, I'm not going to do this with you. I forget what my attitude was, but I kind of had this attitude, and there's this thing within British culture that has to do with kind of colonialism and ownership of things that you don't really own, and you know, the idea that, you know, you created punk, but you really didn't, because it was created in New York years before, and blah, 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 blah. The English will tell you they invented jazz if you let them get away with it. So I had this kind of attitude like you're an outsider. But the truth is, Steve, I was from California.
That's right.
So I was an outsider too. But I had this attitude, right? I had this thing because she was English. And I have this love-hate thing with it because I love London and I love the English. I love your style. I love everything about you. But I also have this thing about, you know, the arrogance of the English that bugs me, especially back then. Nowadays, it's different because hip-hop took over the world. and everybody's on the hip hop jock. But back then, in the early 80s, there was a real competition between London and New York as to which city was the dopest. And London was coming out with all kinds of amazing bands and amazing music. And New York was coming out with all kinds of amazing things. And there was a lot of competition, a lot of anger and whatever, but it was healthy because we made each other even stronger through competition. So I really look back on it and say, I appreciate that. That didn't happen with any other country. Like, we didn't have that relationship with the Italians or the French or the Japanese or whatever. It was only the English that had the balls to compete with New York and have the goods to compete with New York. And that competition built both of our cities mutually to higher and higher levels.
We've always seen, New York as, you could say as part of London or, as family, because there's always been that connection. We've always been tight.
York, where did we get the name York from? Got it from England, right? New York. Right. York is an English name, an English place. Before there was ever in America, there was some place in England called York, right?
Yeah. Without a doubt. Yeah, no, that's a good point. But no, we love New York. Do you know what I mean?
I know. And I love London. And New York, people who love New York, who are New Yorkers, always love London. And Londoners who love London love New York because we feed off each other, we compliment each other, we surprise and delight each other, and we make each other feel at home too at the same time. So there's something beautiful about the relationship between London and New York that there's no other two cities in the world that has that relationship.
That connection. Yeah. I feel like, New York is like my second home.
Nice.
And I'm not just saying that. I grew up with, TV shows from New York, and
or movies from New York,
and things
really.
like Kojak.
Yeah.
Kojak, and there was so many, and films like Taxi Driver.
Yeah, exactly.
And obviously The Warriors. The Warriors being one of my most favourite films of all time. What an incredible film The Warriors
Can you
was.
dig it?
Can you dig it? Yeah, such an incredible film.
For all of you listeners out there who are film fans who want to find a film that I guarantee you never heard of or never saw, but is so wicked, New York, Gangs of New York. It's called The Education of Sonny Carson. Peep that film.
I've heard of that, yeah.
The Education of Sonny Carson. There's been rappers and producers and hip-hop producers who have actually sampled lines from that film. But that film is dope.
Wicked.
The Warriors is, you got gangs dressed up like baseball players. That, of course, never happened. It was a little silly. But The Education of Sonny Carson, they actually used real gangs as actors.
I've seen it. Yeah, it's amazing. I've seen that actually.
That film is hardcore.
Yeah, I have seen that. It's a
for real.
Wicked. And actually, I think it was you that told me to go and watch it, and I did watch it. Absolutely, another mind-blowing film.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. But listen, I'm an observer. I take note and I look at things. And when I met you today, Michael, straight away, your top popped out at me. Beat Street.
Yeah, my jumper.
Beat Street, and you got your Beat Street 40th.
Playboy. This is so Orchard Street. This is so early hip hop crews where we would get these letters, press on letters, with our crew names and our b-boy names, and oftentimes it'd be a Playboy bunny, and so we had these made when we when we did the press release to announce to the world that we were bringing Beat Street to Broadway and that we were partnering as a co-producer with myself, Arthur Baker, our British financier partner, Richard Fern, and the one and only Nas.
Tell me about this. Come on, tell me. Beat Street going to Broadway. We've got to see it up in London Lights as well. This is big news.
Yeah.
Like one of the Beat Street being such a great film anyway, but obviously taking it to Broadway onto a show is on another scale.
Yeah.
So, can you tell me a little bit about it? Who's going to be playing like crews or like some of the graffiti artists in it? Is it going to be like?
Well, as you know, Beat Street was an early and very important film that helped spread hip hop culture around the world. It wasn't quite as authentic as Wild Style. It came out after Wild Style, but it was a bigger Hollywood film that had the opportunity through VHS tapes to just spread itself around the globe. And because of that, it was the most influential film to spread the culture worldwide.
And it still had a lot of legends in that
And it
film
had
as
legends.
well.
The Treacherous Three was in there. Cool Herc's in there. Rocksteady Crew, New York City Breakers. Sha Rock from Funky 4 Plus One More is in the film with Us Girls, with Lisa Lee and Debbie D. So there's a lot of real names that came through that. Phase 2 was part of the making of that film. And so basically, Arthur Baker, who did all the music for that film, and myself, who wrote some scenes, choreographed scenes, was a talent wrangler, brought in artists into the film. And for me, I'm most proud of is second unit directing the battle scene. And the battle scene is a battle between Rocksteady Crew and New York City Breakers. And unlike everything else in the film, it's real.
And that has to be, I'm not going to lie, that has to be one of the greatest battle scenes in history ever.
On film. You're absolutely right. Now listen, as we all know, when we see B-boys and B-girls on tape today at, Monster or Red Bull BC1 competitions, breaking is on another planet compared to what it was.
Some of them moves are unreal.
I mean, it's unreal what they do now. The female breakers could burn male breakers. Female breakers today could burn male breakers from 40 years ago.
Yeah,
that's how it's advanced it is. But as far as filming a battle between two different crews, there's no greater battle scene on film than the battle between the Rocksteady Crew and the New York City Breakers in the film Beat Street. And the reason is because it was a real battle. So the director, I remember very well the director coming to me and saying, the director was Stan Lathan, who before that had been directing Soul Train episodes. He knew that I had been managing Rocksteady and New York City Breakers and had put the New York City Breakers on TV and in other films many times. So he knew that I had a good idea about how to film breaking. And he asked my opinion, like, what should I do? What would you advise? And I said, listen, man, this is not the kind of battle and change the lights and change the camera and shoot from another direction and do that all day. This is a real battle. This you have to capture this one time. So I said the best way to do this is one opportunity, one take opportunity. I said what you want to do is you want to get 5 different cameras, 5 different angles, and shoot this battle because there won't be any opportunity to stop and cut and interrupt it. And that's exactly what he did. And so
there was no retake. It was literally
it's all one take.
Really?
But with 5 different cameras.
It was incredible.
So it looks like it's been cut. It's been taken 5 different times, but it cuts together like butter because it's all one take.
It's incredible. I mean, and what was the reason behind, like Rocksteady wearing, I think they was in blue, and New York City Breakers were wearing red.
Right.
Was it just so they can stand out?
So that's how crew battles happen. In reality, crews when they came to battle, they would oftentimes be in uniform and they would look different from each other.
Oh yeah, no, without a doubt. I mean, it had to stand out for the film as well. Anyway, you had to have like one crew blue and one crew red.
Yeah, it was all Puma gear too.
One question before we play the track is, would you say, you've been asked this before thousands of times, but would you say breaking is a dance or a sport, or would you say it's both?
It's both.
I say it's both as well.
Yeah. It's a sport in which you can dance. It's a sport that you dance in, and it's a dance that you battle in. And if battling isn't sport, I don't know what is.
Well, do you know what? You're bang on. At first, I always thought, no, it's a dance. But I've looked up what the word sport means. And sport means, if you look it up, it means, to basically like battle like an individual or a team or be competitive, you know, that is like a sport.
That's what battling is.
That's what battling is. Yeah.
So I mean, I have this debate all the time with Ken Swift, and he and I are really good friends. And
yeah, big up to Ken.
I love
Swift.
Ken, and he's always said, you know, Michael, it's not a sport, man. I see it only as an art form, and I always argue
which it is an art form,
which it is an art form, but it happens to be an art form that can be a sport too. And I always say to him, okay, that's fine, but you go around the world judging battles all the time. What is a battle? Is a battle not competition? Isn't somebody competing against someone else? Yeah. Well, that's a sport. That's the definition of a sport. Two opposing teams or individuals trying to better the other.
No, I'm with you. I would say it's both.
Yeah.
So yeah, going back to you know, Beat Street the musical. I mean, tell me about that. You know, have you got any plans for when it's going to come out? You know.
Yeah. So you know, Arthur Baker, who did the music for Beat Street, and myself, who you know, was associate producer on the film. We decided, I think it was his wife's idea. Why don't you bring this to Broadway? And we were like, yeah, that's a great idea. And so it didn't take long for us, through contacts that Arthur Baker had, because he lived in London for about 20 years, back in the 90s and 2000s. And so he knew a lot of people in London. And through his contacts, we found this cat named Richard Fern, who joined us as a producer, as a finance producer. And we worked on it for a number of years. But then, through good fortune and luck, we found out that Beat Street was Nas's favorite film.
Wow.
In general, just his favorite film. And he actually said that on TV. And someone said, did you hear this? Nas said it's his favorite film. It was when we were in the middle of trying to make this happen. We reached out to his people and met with him. And it took about a year, but we eventually got him signed on as a co-producer as well. So the four of us now are bringing Beat Street to Broadway.
Wow.
It's going to take probably another couple of years before we get the script finished, the casted, getting the music done, finding the right theater. But I hope like in 2 or 3 years, Beat Street will be on Broadway, and soon after that it'll be on the West End.
Wow, that would be absolutely incredible.
Yeah, it'll do great in England. It'll do great everywhere.
Yeah.
It'll blow up on the West End. It'll blow up on Broadway. Think about Beat Street in the West End.
Can you imagine?
Kids will go mad.
Wow. Do you know what? And people will be dressed up, you know, like original London B-boys like me from,
Hell yeah.
You know, 1980 or 82. You know, I'm going to be turning up with a lino on my shoulder.
Turning up and turned out.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. I know you will.
Yeah, I will. I'm going to rock the Kango and everything.
Hell yeah, man.
Yeah. All right, moving on now. We're going to play one of or a couple of your tracks, actually. So tell me about the first track we're going to be rocking the cab with.
Well, I don't know what that is. What track is it?
Well, the first track is the James Lavelle one.
So James Lavelle took a track of ours that at the time it was still in experimentation and still in the process of getting it on the album. We called it Flatbush Pimp. And then we started adding lyrics to it called New York City Have Some Pity. Then we turned it over to James Lavelle. He actually, we actually played for him a number of tracks. And when he heard that track, he said, this is the one I want to work on. And so he took this track that was originally called Flatbush Pimp, and then it was called New York City Have Some Pity, and he remixed it, pumped it up, took it apart, put it back together again, and really made it like a fabulous dance track that we love so much. And just to be able to do this with a legend like James Lavelle from London, and to be in your black cab talking about it, shout out to you, James, man. Love you, brother.
Yeah, big up, James. If you ever watch this, we need to get you in the cab as well.
Yeah, you got to get you in the cab, man.
I need to get James in the cab.
No doubt.
Big up to Uncle. But yeah, listen, I'll tell you what.
And not only James, but his partner and Uncle is involved in this as well, very much. Stephen Weston is also part of Uncle and very much a part of the making of this track, New York City Have Some Pity.
Wow.
So peep it, kids. It's going to blast out.
It's going to rock out, and this cab is going to be literally, I'm not being funny, but we might have to put some stabilizers on the side of it, because this is going to be, the cab is going to be rocked. So I'll tell you what, let's set up the boombox and let's get this thing fired up. You ready for this?
Here we go.
Let's get the Ultra Cab fired up.
All right, you ready, Steve?
Right, let me buckle up.
Better. Buckle up for safety, because this shit's gonna rock.
This thing's gonna rock the cab out. Right, let's blast this thing, hit the play.
All right, you ready, kids?
You know what time it is.
2, 1, 2, 3, hit it!
Makes me dizzy. New York City, have some pity. Girl so pretty, makes me dizzy. New York City, have some pity. Girl so pretty, makes me dizzy. New York City, have some pity. Girl so pretty, makes me dizzy. New York City, has some pity. Girl so pretty, makes me dizzy.
Absolutely incredible.
So now do, all right, so this is a track called Dan Asher, King Brit Mud Club remix. And it's a track that Nick Taylor and Ive Gray created called Dan Asher, a real frenetic, kinetic, high intensity track that immediately appealed to King Brit, who, you know, was part of and played live with Diggable Planets and was a friend. So he decided this is the one that he had to rock and invited his boy Burgundy Prince to spit rhymes on the microphone, and it goes a little something like this. Yeah, get up.
Let's do this.
Get up. Yeah, here it comes. Woo.
Let's do this.
Hannibal, sable, utensil, builders, releasing the path of living, goes in the new winter that swarm from the intestines of a hostile pencil. Fix the amulet and plyometric sorcerers wielding acrylic news made from the psychiatric. Fade, held and torn hostage, run up on your beating. Dark children gallop for bounty, disguised as ecological fixtures. We clean like science, even if they distort the margin of a masturbated picture. Vaporous pirouettes, an abolitionist ran to lucid parachute, draping the hacienda, Maybelline kisses and Jefferson heirloom. Our magic will strangle the Philistines. 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 The night is at my command. Bluetooth DNA strand that link animal strains and connected by onyx command. You're running into the light. Get lost in the moment they turn right. Our magic will strangle the Philistines. 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 Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. Our magic will strangle the Philistines. 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 Come on. Come on. Come on.
That's gonna be good.
And so where can people download the album?
Oh, well, you know, you can get the album, the vinyl, if you go to Amazon and plug in Last of the Beats by Gray, and it'll come right up on Amazon.
Gray with an A, everyone. Gray with an A.
Gray with an A, not with an E, but with an A.
But Michael, it's been an absolute honour having you in the cab, and I hope you've enjoyed this little cab chat.
Oh man, I loved every second of this. So great, Steve, to be part of this. Thank you very much for having me. I love London. I love being in this town, and it rocks, it rolls. And when I'm here, man, I'm so inspired. Everything blows up for me. Everything gets big, and I'm so excited. Got to be in there.
And also, one big shout out to Alvin, leave as well. Big shout out to Alvin.
Absolutely.
Do you want to give a shout out to anyone?
Yeah, I got to give 3 shout outs. Number 1, to my boy, my partner in crime, DJ High Priest Nicholas Taylor, who he and I made this album, who carry on the great tradition of Gray music, and we continue to create, and we continue to do beautiful things. And while here in London, I want to give a big shout out to my boy James Lavelle and his partner in crime, Stephen Weston. They make up Uncle, and together we made this track, New York City Have Some Pity. And lots of love to King Britt and Burgundy Prince, who together with Gray, we made the track, the Dan Asher Mud Club Mix.
Wicked, absolutely wicked. And big shout out to all of you, and we must get James Lavelle in the cab as well, because that would be absolutely wicked as well. I'm a big fan of Uncle. But
you got to get Arthur Baker in the cab.
I want to get Arthur. I've tried to get in touch with Arthur Baker, but yeah, I'd love to get Arthur.
I can hook you up.
I'll try and speak to Ross, or that'd be wicked.
I'll talk to him.
I know we're pushed for time now, isn't it, Michael? So
yeah.
Listen, it was an absolute honour, and I just hope you enjoyed this little cab ride.
It's my favorite black cab ride I've ever had.
Well, we've got to have to end it on that note. But listen, my man,
I'm going to let you go.
Everyone watching this,
pop out.
Make sure you download and support Michael's music. All right?
And let me know, send me the bill for the cab ride. I don't have any cash on me right now.
On the meter, but I do mates rates.
I don't have any cash on me.
Don't worry, I'll take cards. Brilliant.